Hello, my name is Andy Kibler, and I'm going to show you how I iterated through the Nitronic Rush level. Specifically, I'm going to show you some iterations of the first story level. So this is one of the iterations of the first story level. This particular iteration was created just after the alpha milestone. The track is currently white because we weren't sure of the color palette at this time for the level. You also notice that I'm almost blowing up on this particular section of the track, and that's mainly due to the fact that this level was balanced for a previous iteration of the boost mechanic. I add a little downhill there to change up gameplay. You just saw I hit a lip there. I'm about to kill myself on another lip, and there was a lot of lips in the older levels, and that's specifically because I had to manually build the level, and it was just really hard to get a precise click on each level piece. Here I use end road caps to signify for the player to jump over, and I also change them to red so that it really pops out to the player. Here I use some makeshift walls to add a bit of a slalom effect to the road. Here I use a tabletop for a safety jump. I usually don't use those though, usually I just use open jumps like that one I just went over. Mainly because the player's going so fast, usually they won't mess up on them. And actually at this point I don't expect the player to be doing a lot of tricks. I'm just doing tricks to get through the level faster. And here if you actually notice, there's no buildings behind the end checkpoint, and actually there is actually only one layer of buildings surrounding the level, which really limits giving the level a city feel. There's actually also no buildings under the track as well, which limits city feel as well. And we actually have streetlights here, which give the level a more dynamic feel. And same with this glass road, it shows the player that there are buildings under the track now, and it also will be showing branching paths later on. And actually, if you notice the traffic quad in the background, that's also to add a dynamic feel to the level. Street light. Here I was actually experimenting with loops, and I'm about to bypass that loop. And so players would do this as well, and so I realized that there's probably no point in building these loops that turn in on themselves, specifically because players are just going to bypass the content. So I might as well put in content that the player will interact with more often rather than stuff they will not. Here we actually have a tube that I don't use all that often, and that's specifically because players were never quite sure of how to interact with it. There, another little dip in the road to add to change up gameplay. Here we're actually about to hit a branching path where I could have just gone slower and went on the bottom path, but I took the top one. Here I'm about to hit a double jump, which I removed from all the story levels, specifically because going over a jump, the player has no idea what's coming afterwards, and it's really hard to orient, especially if you're not used to rotating the car. It's hard to orient the car to take on that second jump. So I just removed them, just because it was too difficult. Here I show off another loop, and actually I put in a ton of lights here to show off the street lights, but as I mentioned, I remove all the loops, and here I'm actually about to show the exploit for this one, and basically you just look to the right, that's where I'm going, just going straight to that checkpoint. Here's another one of those jumping sections, and I actually added the checkpoints close enough together to where you're about to overheat usually, but you shouldn't fully overheat most of the time. I start to space out the checkpoints in later levels so that the player starts actually doing tricks, or starts realizing that they're going to need to do tricks if they want to boost forever. And here we have another glass road to show off the buildings underneath, and also here I'm just showing more of the layered city that I was talking about. Instead of just having one layer of buildings, now I have multiple layers of buildings to make the level feel even more like a city. Buildings are also further under the road to make it feel like the road's really high up in the air. I also have roads that are going over the road that the player's currently on, and that's to make it feel like that the city is more than what the player sees, and that's really important to give that city feel. And here I have another drop-off section to change up gameplay. And then we have another branching road here that I decided to choose the bottom one, but in this particular section I actually caused the player to jump back up to the top one. That's just to add like just a dynamic feel to the track. Here I'm actually about to jump onto another piece of the track. I implemented this crossover piece, and I noticed players were actually using it a lot, and so I decided to put in more of the levels, just so that players can experiment with speeding up times by jumping onto other pieces of the track. Here we actually kind of have a boring straightaway that I remedy in the final iteration of the level, which should be coming up right now. And actually I have the spotlights now to show the end area, or at least where the player should be going. And here now we have the static on the billboards, we have the traffic lines that you see right up there, and here I'm showing you a little more of the forest of buildings that I started working on, or layers of buildings. And we have the flickering street lights. I mean, we had a lot of trouble with trying to pull Nitronic from being a static city to being a more dynamic and more lively city. We tried to do a lot to make it feel like it was an actual city. And the interesting thing is, actually, most of the buildings in every single level are just two sets of building assets. And the only reason why you don't see the repeating is because I'm rotating and changing the color of the buildings, which really helps out with that. And I also added in arrows for the final iteration of the levels, and that's to tell the player where they need to go, and to also add a visual effect to the road to tell the player, yes, this is a racetrack. And also you notice that now the tunnels and the jumps and the glass roads are orange, and orange is the complementary color to blue, and so orange really stands out comparatively to the blue, and that's why I used it, is so that it really popped and that the player really noticed it when they went over it. And there I actually just showed one of the pulsing gold lights that we have at the top at a few of our buildings, and that's again to add a more dynamic feel to the level. And here I actually added lights to give that whiz-by light effect that you get when you're going through a tunnel. And here we're actually going to go into a color transition, and I add in the red lights to catch players' eyes to actually notice the color transition. And we do the color transition specifically because we didn't want to disorient the player or to jar the player when we switched between levels, because each level is a different color. So we decided to have a transition at the end of each level so it wouldn't jar the player as much. So those were some iterations of the story level that I built, the first story level that I built in Nitronic Rush. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you got some insight on how I build levels in Nitronic Rush. I thank you for watching.